Charles, you down with FDD?
I am down with FDD.
You're supposed to say, yeah, you know me. We're doing our rep version. We're franchise repping. I had a disagreement with someone recently on when it went from UFOC to FDD, but that was a long time ago, and I think FDD is a better name for it than a UFOC.
I would think so. I think most people listening are not even going to know the distinction, right?
No.
Which is franchise disclosure document versus years ago called Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, right?
Oh, look at that. Look at you dropping the knowledge.
No, it's useless knowledge, right?
It's great knowledge. I mean, look, I think a lot of franchisors get UFOC'd by the brokers. So, you like that?
No.
Nope. I like when I say something where you want to comment, but then the non-comment comes up. So
my filter kicks in.
I like the filter.
And it's rarely used, so it's good.
So, okay, so the FDD, I'm going to read this out loud. I mean, this is really your show, but before you invest in any franchise, get a copy of the franchisor's franchise disclosure document. I mean, that seems a little bit like too simple. Like, hey, Charles, can you send me that FDD? Under the franchise rule enforced by the FTC, you must receive the document at least 14 days before you are asked to sign any contract or pay any money to the franchisor or an affiliate of the franchisor. You have the right to ask for and get a copy of the FDD once the franchisor has received your application and agreed to consider it. That's interesting. I have a follow-up question on that. Indeed, you may want to get a copy of the franchisor's FDD before you spend any money to investigate the franchise offering. The franchisor may give you a copy of the FDD on paper, via email, through a web page, or on a disc. Oh, I would like to see one on a disc. That would be kind of cool. The cover of the FDD must provide information about available formats. Make sure you have a copy of the FDD in a format that is convenient to you and keep a copy for reference. Read each of the 23 numbered items in the FDD. Don't be shy about asking for explanations, clarifications, answers to your questions before you invest. So immediate two questions that I would have is, one, does the franchisee need to hire an attorney to get it? And secondly, if you've filled out an application, can you mandate that based on how they're saying it? Can you mandate that they have to give you the FDD?
So short answer to both is yes, they should hire an attorney, and yes, you could request and mandate that they send you an FDD for sure.
Interesting.
Which, Nick, even before we go further, I mean, in this guide, do they even explain what the FDD is?
Well, let's go. Let's search for franchise disclosure.
So is that the first paragraph on franchise disclosure document?
We have something on the brokers. Yep, this is it. This is the first one.
So they're telling you, franchise buyer, before you invest to get the FDD, that a franchisor has to give it to you 14 days before you sign an agreement. But they're not telling you what it is. I mean, down more, they're going to go through each item of the FDD, but I think we're missing the bigger picture here, right?
Yeah, shouldn't this come like, I mean, after you've understood that there's a franchise business model, then don't you want to understand how the contract agree? And maybe that's part of the business model. Should you understand how?
I mean, look, I think it should be the second topic item before selecting the right franchise, right? Which is, so if I were writing this section, I'd say, hey, potential franchise buyer, nothing's guaranteed, and there's a ton of information you should be evaluating before you invest in a franchise. But to help you out, under the federal franchise rule, we require a franchisor to give you a disclosure document. We call it a franchise disclosure document. It's broken down into different sections that we call items, And the whole point of it is to provide you with important information that you should be evaluating before you sign an agreement or pay any fees. It is one tool that you should be evaluating as you make a decision on whether or not to invest in a particular franchise. And here's what's included in the FDD, right? I think that, they skipped over one part of like the why.
Well, not that I want to get into the business of criticizing the FTC, but they're very happy to say the franchise rule enforced by the FTC. But shouldn't they put rules of how an FDD is written so that some of the garbage language that gets into a bad FDD doesn't happen? Like, shouldn't they say, like, if this is the guideline for buying this business, this is how it's compliant?
Yeah, one of the biggest problems. So for the buyers out there, FDD, franchise disclosure document, it's a pre-sales disclosure. Government has taken the viewpoint of how do we protect buyers of franchises or business opportunities? And their answer is sort of like a stock or a security. We're going to give you a pre-sales disclosure document telling you who the franchisor is, the fees they charge, things that we think are important for you to evaluate. So what the concern I have about it, so it's a giant document with a ton of information, your sample agreements. The concern I have is some franchise buyers view it as a validation or as if that document protects them, but it's not. It's just information. It's not registered with the government. It's a useful tool, but it should be one of other tools that you're going to use to evaluate the franchise. Here's the best way to think of an FDD. If there's something negative in it, then it's a red flag to walk away from the franchise. But don't look at it for the positive. If you're reading positive things in the FDD, discard that. Evaluate that in the real world.
Interesting. That's great advice. So you said the document is not registered with the government, but there's registration states. What's the difference?
So there's federal law that applies throughout the entire United States. Federal Trade Commission and the franchise rule says everywhere in the country, franchisor, you need to update your FDD every year. You need to disclose it to franchisee candidates before they buy a franchise. And there's a 14-day waiting period. You self-validate at the federal level. Okay, I'm a franchisor. I think I provided all the info that the federal franchise rule requires, and I'll disclose it. But the government is not checking the FDD. Now, what you bring up, Nick, are certain states, registration states. Certain states have said, hey, in addition to the federal rule, we want franchisors to file their FDD with us. We're going to review it, and they need to register with us before they sell. So there's, in theory, they're trying to protect more. But even at the state level, the state regulator is not validating or confirming the accuracy of the information disclosed. They're really just evaluating the format. Are you disclosing the types of things we want disclosed, not whether or not that information is accurate?
Yeah. So to a franchise buyer, I mean, we haven't gone through registration states, which I don't know if that's overly relevant, but a registration state has put another hurdle that the franchisor has to get over to get approved, right? Like they still there's someone that's going to check that document and say whether they feel it's compliant or not, or if there needs to be edits, right?
Right. But so if you're a franchise buyer, states like New York, California, Illinois, Washington, Virginia, and a few others, a minority of states require franchisors to register with them. Don't view that registration process as added value to you in terms of the FDD itself. The state is just ensuring compliance with disclosures. They're not validating the information. Yeah. So there's an extra layer. Also, you should be working with a franchise lawyer as you review the FDD. And also, when you work with a franchise lawyer, you need to know, and I don't want to bog everyone down in this, certain states, while registration doesn't necessarily protect you as a franchise buyer, certain states have passed what we call franchise relationship laws that give you extra protection under the terms of your contract. So a state like New Jersey has franchise relationship laws, and if you become a franchise buyer and the franchisor wants to terminate your agreement, well, not only do they have to comply with the franchise agreement itself, but New Jersey may give supplemental rights. So let's frame this. FDD, pre-sales disclosure document designed to equip you with information before you make an investment decision, has to be given to you 14 days before you sign an agreement or pay any fee. Some states will regulate a little more and require the franchisors to register with them. And then other states may actually try to supplement your rights on franchise relationship laws. Now, how does this equip you when you're buying a franchise? Well, you should talk to your lawyer about it, but also, understanding the disclosures in the FDD, but also from the perspective of your franchise lawyer and even other advisors like a broker on, well, two companies, same industry. Why does one FDD report estimated initial investment of $200,000 and the other one reports estimated initial investment of $300,000? Exact same business. Are they disclosing things differently? Are they estimating differently? So look at it more from a baseline level of what red flags are popping up and how does that compare to competition?
Question is for someone that's watching, is the agreement attached to the FDD?
Yeah, so part of the protection is, hey buyer, we're going to give you information, who the franchisor is, fees, a summary of legal provisions, and every agreement that you're supposed to sign, every legal agreement, we require that it be attached as an exhibit to the FDD. So you should have the disclosure part, which is information about the franchise, and attached to it is also going to be the agreements you're going to be expected to sign.
So you disclose the document, you sign the agreement. The agreement is a part of the FDD. You pay your fees, and now you're a franchisee.
Correct.
So it's interesting. Like if you think about that process versus buying a house, that seems a lot easier than buying a home. Like, are we just not there as a business regulatory environment? Like buying a house seems much more tripped up than buying a franchise.
I mean, but if you think about it, Nick, there's more disclosure and regulation over buying a franchise than a house, right? Yeah. You buy a house, in this case, a house, you observe it, it's physically there, you order an inspection, and you buy it. And, but you have established markets, you know what market value is, you get an appraisal, and you get an appraisal, and you get a home inspection.
Right.
It's more of an established market and known commodity. A franchise, there's more certainty. So actually, there's more regulation when buying a franchise. Franchisors need to give a detailed disclosure about their opportunity, which would be the equivalent of saying, hey, before you sell a house, you're going to get a disclosure on who owned the house, what's the history of the house, how much revenue potential the house generates, the cost to purchase it, the cost to maintain it, ongoing fees. I mean, if we were comparing them.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. I think that'd be nice to have in the home buying process. So, okay, so I'll just find a statement in here and you just provide feedback on it. Item 1 tells you how long the franchisor has been in business and its likely competition. Anything else that is important to note in item 1?
It's almost irrelevant, right? But it's going to tell you who you're dealing with. You're dealing with XYZ company, and if you're in lawn care, your competition's lawn care and other service providers.
Not specifics. They don't go into specifics.
Well, it's general. Items 1, everything up to items 1, 2, 3. I would just look for them for red flags.
I mean, item 2, for what it's worth, when I'm looking at an FDD, I like looking at the depth of the leadership, and I like seeing a bio that gives me a little bit of understanding of who's there, who's the visionaries,
Well, I agree, but again, I wouldn't view it as a positive, only if there's a red flag. They don't have enough team members to support, their team
Interesting.
members lack depth. I wouldn't get all excited over someone's 50 years experience with other franchise systems and other stuff,
Good point.
because that may mean they're good at selling franchises. I'll take, grassroots on the ground founders any day over C-suite.
Litigation. This one I think is a trip up one, because you look at it, if you see litigation in there and it's significant. Now, obviously, there's two sides to every story, but if there's more than one in there, then there's another red flag to say what happens if this doesn't work out, right?
Yeah. So item 3, franchisors have to disclose litigation that the franchisor is involved or their team members identified in item 2. That involves fraud, franchising. Now, you may have just a common suit, like you have to terminate a franchisee. But here's where you're going to look for red flags for sure.
Bankruptcy. I feel like this used to be a bigger deal than it is now. I don't know what your take is, but
I think that's a great assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, the theory is, hey, franchise buyer, if the people you're dealing with filed bankruptcy, that's relevant to your evaluation or can be. That's the theory behind it, right? I don't know how relevant it is. Depends on the organization and the team, right? If a franchisor is in bankruptcy, then they're probably not issuing their FDD.
Yeah.
But if a team member was, well, maybe there's something wrong with a founder. Who knows?
Item 5 through 7. I mean, there's a whole bunch of bullet points
Well,
here.
and these are the sections they should really be focused on, right?
Okay.
And not skimming over. 5 is the initial fees you're going to pay. So when you sign a franchise agreement, to get that right, you're going to pay an initial franchise fee. It's to enter the game. It's non-refundable. That's one of the most common fees in item 5. If you're buying multiple territories or multi-unit development agreement, it'll tell you the pricing terms. Item 6, ongoing fees. What's the ongoing royalty you're supposed to pay? Is it a percentage royalty rate? Are there minimum royalties? And then item 7, so 5, 6, and 7 are critical. 7 is estimated initial investment. Those, they shouldn't just lump together. They should have a whole section on it.
Yeah, I mean, they just made it very, very simple, right?
What's that?
You just said like that's the most important. That's the starting point, and it kind of gets brushed over here, right?
Yeah, because so you think about, look at item 6 and say, okay, I'm paying an ongoing 6% royalty, but subject to a minimum royalty amount of $1,000 a month.
Right.
Well, that's relevant because that's going to affect your unit economics,
Totally.
right? So those,
items 8 and 12.
Yeah. So, hey, I'll summarize item 8. You can only sell what the franchisor tells you to sell. You can only use the suppliers that the franchisor tells you. So you really need to have faith in the franchisor. Item 12 is important because it talks about what type of territories you get and what's excluded from your territory. If you're a restaurant and there's a stadium in your territory, does the franchisor carve out the right to open up a location in the stadium?
Good point.
Right? How, if you're getting a territory, what is the data? Is it qualified households, population? Key, item 12 is critical. But look at item 12. I wouldn't combine items 8 and 12. I combine items 5 and 12. 5 is your initial fees. So I pay a fee, I get a territory. What is the size of the territory? If I buy multiple territories, how does that work and what are the fees?
Right.
So it should be 5 and 12 together.
Item 11, advertising and training.
You got to follow their training. Advertising is interesting. You probably won't see it there. The advertising is really just going to say you can only use marketing they approve. Bigger question for you as franchisee or franchise buyer is, what is the marketing program? How much should I be budgeting for marketing? Right. What's the pre-launch marketing budget? What's ongoing marketing budget? Because if you don't get that right, you're not going to do well.
I'm feeling that's going to trip up a lot of franchisors, because when you say, what's your advertising plan? Most don't have one.
No. And most FDDs are bad in the sense that they say you need to spend 3% of your gross sales on marketing. Okay. So if first month's gross sales are 0, 3% is 0. Or if my sales are, so if I'm killing it, doing $1 million a month in gross sales, You're saying I should spend 3%. If someone's doing poorly, spending 100,000 a month in gross sales, they should spend 3%. So they're spending less than me.
Great point. That could be a whole nother topic. Training, I think training ends up being deeply important here. And if it gets brushed over, then, are you set up to succeed?
Right. And I mean, look, they're just going to give you a training schedule. Training's more of a validation when you speak with other franchisees. Nick, you bring this up often. When you're validating with other franchisees and you have the would you do it again question, was it the support you expected? Were the startup costs what they disclose in item 7? That's where you're going to find out how valuable the training is.
Yeah. Item 17, renewal, termination, transfer, and dispute. Anything that's valuable in that?
I mean, look, you're going to get an initial term. Typically, it's 10 years and a renewal term. So you'll talk to your lawyer about that.
Is item 19 the most important part of the FDD?
Well, to me, it's combined with items 5, 6, 7, 19. Those together tell you the economic story. 5 tells you initial fees, 6 tells you ongoing fees, 7 tells you what it's going to cost to open up the business, and item 19 tells you what the income potential is. You take items 5 and 19, you want to start evaluating potential ROI, and ultimately item 19 is the financial data, right? Franchisors can't tell you how much you can make or how much they make or past performance unless it's disclosed in item 19, and that's where you need to start discerning clues and data about what your potential income and profitability potential is as a franchise buyer.
So on item 19, one, it says it doesn't require a franchisor to provide it, which there are franchisors that skip it over. Obviously, less today than, say, 10 years ago. What's interesting here, the franchisor may provide the actual records of an existing outlet you're thinking of buying. That seems like an interesting loophole of being able to say, let me give you a more detailed P&L, which should be in there anyway. And then the franchisor may add to information in item 19. For example, the franchisor may provide information about possible performance at a particular location or under particular circumstances. That seems pretty loose.
Well, it's actually pretty, using the example of franchisor may provide actual records of existing outlet you're thinking of buying. That makes sense. So if it's a resale, Nick, you're going to buy my location, it's been in operation 2 years. Well, my data is completely relevant and it's historical. Here's the data. But that's in a resale transaction. That's what that's
about. 20, any notes on there?
Yeah, pretty big, which is it's going to show a running 3-year history, including on a state-by-state basis, of the number of franchise locations or outlets that were open at the start of the year and at the end of each year. New ones, closures, transfers. So you want to see historical trends. Is this a franchise system that's growing? Do they have a lot of closures? What's going on? Are they a startup? Are they a mature brand? Are they in a growth phase? If there's a lot of closures that are disproportionate, why is that happening?
Well, that's on item 20 is pretty loaded.
Yeah, I mean, I'd put it up there with item 19.
Franchise associations of the franchisors, franchisees are an important source of information. That doesn't seem that important.
No, it's not. I mean, for a bigger brand, if we're McDonald's and there's the McDonald's Franchisee Association,
yeah,
you go there and get some data, but that's really big brands.
Item 21.
Franchisor financial statements. It's valuable. Consider, though, that for emerging and startup franchisors, their financials are going to be basically $0.
Aren't they fudged too? Because you're going to fill the bank account up during the audit to appear.
Actually, they're not, though. So many new franchisors have just minimum dollars in it. You need to evaluate the opportunity, the unit economics. Sure, as a system is bigger, you don't want to see, a maturing system or even a 25 unit system where the balance sheet is showing no cash flow or no liquidity.
Yeah.
Right. So there's relevance here.
Well, that's it on the way that they tell you to look at it. I mean, in my closing opinion, I like when franchisors have a piece of content that says this is what you're going to see in the FDD, so it gives them their viewpoint on it, just so that they have a manifesto on their FDD. I find that to be a valuable tool. And if I'm listening to what you said, like you still want an attorney involved here, just you're signing a 10-year agreement that it's really hard and difficult to get out of. Put the initial investment into this before you make a decision. I think those are my two thoughts. Yours?
No, I'm good with that. And not make sure the attorney's experienced in franchise law, because attorneys that don't deal with this every day will be shocked, and they don't have the right insight. The other thing, to our hardworking friends at the Federal Trade Commission, if anyone's watching this would be a perfect video to embed in this guide. I would just throw that out there.
Maybe they're watching. Who knows? They're always watching, right?
Yes. Well, listen.
I'm going to put this up here because we got a question. Is there anywhere in the FDD that discloses the franchisor's exit plans, timeframes for exit by the founder?
I mean, it's a smart question. The answer is no. I mean, that's a next level question, which gets to, hey, I buy a franchise. I believe in the founders.
Great question.
Great leaders, great people. And, Nick, we talk about it so often, how franchisees are motivated by that founder connection leadership. And gee, it's sad. They sell to private equity or whatever, and they're gone. So unfortunately, that's an important factor. There's no required disclosure. But that's a smart question that if I'm a buyer, I'd say, hey, founder, I'm buying because of you. Are you going to be gone next year?
So before we close out, and the next topic that we're going to hit is evaluating your potential earnings. But say you're in a discovery day and you say, hey, founder, you have any plans to exit? They're like, no, I'm in this for the long haul. And then they exit, 6 months later. Is there any protection on that, or are you just kind of screwed?
Well, I mean, don't forget, we're still in the world of, there's still commercial law. That would be, I mean, in that scenario, if the founder, let's in this hypothetical say, is at that moment signing a letter of intent for an acquisition, that's just common law fraud, and typical contract law, you could actually sue someone over it.
Well, look, we're going to get into potential earnings next. I think that aligns. Like, look, if you're building a business that has success, eventually you're going to be the founder of your own journey, and it's allow you to take off. So hopefully, look, you just watched a video. Charles, thanks for your expertise. You're obviously the expert on this topic. I would actually rebrand you as Charles FDD. I think like that would be
That'd be a horrible name, though. I would never want to be known as that.
But then when I say, are you down with FDD? And you say, yeah, you know me, like you and I have built a rap group that takes on, we can perform at franchise conferences.
I think that would be horrible.
The Fran X.